Tyson Fury versus Dillian Whyte, keys to victory. Let's start off first with the challenger Dillian Whyte. I think that Dillian Whyte needs to come in light for this fight so he can be more mobile than normal. Because if he's flat-footed, if he's plodding around the ring, heel toe, etc., then it's going to be much easier for Tyson Fury to establish his range and start hitting Dillian Whyte with whatever shots he wants to hit him with. If Dillian Whyte is lighter and gets up on his toes and can bounce on the edge of range, he can offset Tyson Fury's range and timing. Steve Cunningham and Otto Wallin did this quite well against Tyson Fury, particularly Steve Cunningham. And of course, in both fights, Tyson Fury abandoned the long-range boxing because he realized that these guys were offsetting his range and timing, and he took it inside. Now, with Otto Wallin, it was partly because he got cut, but of course, he got caught with the shot that cut him because Wallin had managed to establish his own range and offset Tyson Fury's range somewhat. Now, for those saying that it's impossible for Dillian Whyte to be able to replicate anything close to what Cunningham or Wallin did in terms of offsetting Tyson Fury's range, well, I would agree that he's never going to be as agile as probably either of those guys. However, he can be more agile than we've seen him in his past few fights. And the reason I know this is because if you look at the first fight with Anthony Joshua when they were amateurs, Dillian Whyte was up on his toes. Now, I know that was a very, very long time ago, and perhaps he wouldn't be able to be that agile today and maintain the kind of strength that he wants to have against Tyson Fury. That's possible. But I do think that he can be a bit more mobile than we've seen him in the past, get up on his toes a little bit. Even against Robert Helenius in the first round, he was actually up on his toes a little bit, bouncing in and out of range and establishing his jab. And in doing this, he was able to beat Helenius to the punch with the jab and also make Helenius miss with his own, slip Helenius' jab and encounter with his own. If he comes in light, he may be able to do something similar against Tyson Fury. The next key is he has to establish the jab to the head and to the body, because with Tyson Fury, it might not always be easy to land the jab to the head if Tyson Fury decides to turn southpaw, but the body will still be open to the jab. Furthermore, in the early rounds, if Tyson Fury is keeping it long and making it difficult for Dillian Whyte to get close, the body will be easier to hit, and that will also start slowing Tyson Fury down, make him more stationary for the later rounds, where Dillian Whyte might be able to mount some kind of serious assault where he's able to pin him on the ropes and start letting go with the heavy artillery upstairs and downstairs. So make sure that that jab isn't just targeting Tyson Fury's head, but it's also targeting the body. Now, you have to be cognizant of the fact that you could get countered over the top of the jab with a Fury right hand. But up until this point, Fury hasn't been that prolific with the right hand in terms of countering over people's jabs. I'm sure he can do it, and I'm sure he has done it, but he's not exactly Lennox Lewis with the right hand over the jab. So Dillian Whyte will probably be able to jab Fury's body without taking too many right hands in return, although it would be prudent to keep your left hand up. We saw against Alexander Povetkin, for example, even in the first fight, Dillian Whyte ended up getting knocked out in that fight. But prior to getting knocked out, he was jabbing very well. That was the best I've seen Dillian Whyte's jab, actually, was in the first Povetkin fight. It was real solid. He wasn't pawing with it so much. He was just throwing it out there as a real stiff ramrod shot, and he was bringing his left hand up to protect himself from any right hands back from Alexander Povetkin. I think he needs to do the same thing here against Tyson Fury. Get that jab upstairs, get that jab downstairs, and then bring it back to protect himself just in case Fury tries to throw a right hand over a lazy jab. Now, the next thing that Dillian Whyte needs to do is to target the injured eye of Tyson Fury. When Lennox Lewis fought Gary Mason many years ago, Gary Mason had eye trouble. So Lennox Lewis had duct tape put on the corner of the sparring partner's headgear, right by the same eye that Mason had a detached retina in. So throughout training camp, Lewis was constantly jabbing this X, right, on the sparring partner's headgear because he made it a strategy. He made it one of his main focuses going into the Mason fight of targeting his injured eye. And indeed, it worked fantastically well. The fight ended in, what was it, 7-8 rounds, something like that. Gary Mason's eye was swollen shut, and Mason had to retire after the fight because he had a detached retina again. You see, so boxing, of course, is a ruthless sport. If your opponent has any kind of injury, if they have any kind of weakness, you're going to target it. And so Dillian Whyte should certainly be looking to try and target Tyson Fury's injured eye. And it is his right eye, I believe, so that lines up nicely with Dillian Whyte's left jab. I know plastic surgery these days has come on leaps and bounds, and they can patch people up very well and use all types of different techniques to make sure that the eye isn't maybe as strong as it was originally, but is somewhere close. Nevertheless, I think that if you hit the guy on that eye often enough, you can swell it up, you can injure it. I mean, just look at Vitaly Klitschko when he fought Kevin Johnson. He'd barely got hit in his career since the Lennox Lewis fight, but Kevin Johnson hit him with a few jabs, and he managed to open up that old injury that Vitaly Klitschko suffered against Lennox Lewis many years prior. Well, the Otto Wallin fight wasn't anywhere near as long ago, right? There's nowhere near as much time between Wallin Fury, or Fury Wallin, should I say, and Fury Whyte, as there was between Vitaly Klitschko, Lennox Lewis, and Vitaly Klitschko, Kevin Johnson. So Fury's eye hasn't had anywhere near as much time to heal as Klitschko's eye had by the time he fought Kevin Johnson, yet his eye was still opened up by Kevin Johnson by his jab. Because let's be real here, this is a Tyson Fury show. I know Dillian Whyte says it's also the Dillian Whyte show because he brings a certain amount of value to the table. He's done pay-per-views before, etc., etc. But it's being promoted by Tyson Fury's promoters, Frank Warren and Bob Arum. It's on Tyson Fury's network, BT Sport. Tyson Fury has managed to make sure that there's no British judges. So it's unlikely, at least in my head, that the officials are going to do Dillian Whyte any favors. Tyson Fury already has the advantage in terms of height and reach. So the least likely scenario is a Dillian Whyte victory on points. I'm not saying it's completely impossible, but to me, that's the least likely scenario. And therefore, he's going to have to try and get a stoppage, either knock Tyson Fury out or target that eye, get that cut open with punches and get the referee to stop it. Perhaps on the doctor's advice, if the referee don't want to stop it because it's a Tyson Fury show and he's in Frank Warren's pocket, make the cut so bad that the doctor keeps on wanting to have a word and that puts pressure on the referee. Or perhaps with blood running into Tyson Fury's eye, Dillian Whyte's able to get other shots off and maybe then get a knockout or maybe then win on points, right? If Tyson Fury really can't see. So target that eye and see if he can open that old injury. Also, Dillian Whyte needs to move his head. Dillian Whyte does have fairly good head movement when he's stationary and also when he's on the back foot, when he's in the pocket. He can slip and slide on the inside. He's quite fluid, but he needs to do that moving forward because if Tyson Fury establishes his range and he's making it awkward for Dillian Whyte, when Whyte is coming in, he needs to make sure that he's not getting walked onto punches. Tyson Fury has shown the ability to walk fighters onto uppercuts. Now, he's also shown the ability to throw uppercuts, make space on the inside and hit guys up close with that shot. But against a much shorter guy in Dillian Whyte, it will probably be a bit more difficult to hit him with an uppercut on the inside than it was someone like Deontay Wilder, who's not as slick on the inside as Dillian Whyte is. Not that Dillian Whyte is Mayweather on the inside, but he's slick on the inside compared to Wilder. And also he's shorter, so when he's up on your chest, again, much more difficult for a taller guy to get something like a short uppercut on. But when Dillian Whyte is coming forward, Tyson Fury could counter him, could walk him onto an uppercut like he did in the second Derek Chisora fight. And therefore, Dillian Whyte needs to be cognizant of that and move his head when he's coming in. Avoid taking the jabs, avoid taking the counters as much as you can against Tyson Fury. Another thing that Dillian Whyte needs to do is feint. I spoke earlier about him coming in light and bouncing up on his toes, moving in and out and trying to throw off Tyson Fury's range and timing. Well, feinting can help you with that as well, because if you can get Tyson Fury going for your feints, it can confuse him, it can make him hesitant, you can make him miss, and that looks good for the judges if you make a guy miss. Even better if you make him pay, but making him miss is the first step. So Dillian Whyte should definitely use some feints because Tyson Fury feints a lot himself. Also, Dillian Whyte needs to be patient in this fight and not get frustrated. If he goes in there hot-headed, looking to steam in and knock Tyson Fury out, maybe Tyson Fury's trash talk gets to him, maybe Tyson Fury's tactics of potentially sticking and moving, tying him up on the inside, maybe this starts to get to Dillian Whyte. It's important that he doesn't get frustrated and that he's patient because Tyson Fury is a box of tricks. He's got a million different ways that he can exploit your mistakes. Don't give him the opportunity to do so. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes keeping it simple is the best course of action. So be patient. Don't get frustrated. Don't let Tyson Fury's trash talk get to you. The next thing is Dillian Whyte needs to not punch from too far out. He has been guilty of this in certain fights in the past. Against Robert Helenius, for example, he would throw shots from too far out on occasion, and you can get away with it against a guy like Helenius. Against Tyson Fury, he's far more likely to make you pay. Now, Helenius may be a bigger puncher than Tyson Fury, but he's certainly not more skilled. Fury is better at just about everything than Helenius other than punching power. And again, it doesn't look good from a judge's perspective when the shorter guy who's trying to get in is swinging and he's air conditioning the front row of the stadium with punches that miss. And this also, as I mentioned in the previous point, can come from frustration. So do not get frustrated, stay calm, and don't punch from too far out. Now, Dillian Whyte's name is the body snatcher, so the next point should go without saying. Dillian Whyte needs to target the body. He needs to slow Tyson Fury's feet down so that he can make him more stationary and drag him into a dogfight. That's where Dillian Whyte has a real chance. As I alluded to earlier, if he can't get close enough to land hooks to the body, land the jab to the body. The next key for Dillian Whyte is to be unpredictable with his power shots. If Tyson Fury is expecting this famous left hook from Dillian Whyte, then try and set Tyson Fury up for the right hand. If you look at Tyson Fury when he fought Steve Cunningham and Nevin Pikage, he got caught with the exact same shot against those guys. Those were both shorter guys, and Fury was moving forward trying to land his own right hand, and he was standing up too tall at too close a range, and he got caught with a big looping overhand right coming in when he was bearing down on the shorter man. Dillian Whyte has a big looping overhand right. It doesn't land very often. It's usually very wild and inaccurate, but it is there. And if there's one fight where it needs to land, it's here against Tyson Fury. But the key to landing that shot is not throwing it too often, not showing his hand too early in the fight, luring Tyson Fury in to a full sense of security where he thinks he can come in standing straight up at a particular distance. Or maybe Tyson Fury is maintaining good range early in the fight and he's not falling into that particular trap. But as the fight goes on, Dillian Whyte manages to lure him in, and then he's been waiting all night to throw that overhand right. Suddenly in the 8th round, he throws it over the top. Tyson Fury gets a bit lackadaisical, gets a bit too comfortable, lands on his chops, down he goes. And one way to set a punch like that up is to constantly throw left hooks. Or conversely, the way to set the left hook up is to constantly throw right hands. It depends what he wants to set up. Dillian Whyte should be looking to jab to the body and then follow up with a power shot to the head, or jab to the head and follow up with a power shot to the body sometimes, or even throw 1-2 to the body several times in a row and condition Tyson Fury to expect that combination to the midriff and then surprise him one time by then throwing the 1-2 to the head instead. And hopefully you'll be able to catch him clean if you do that. Another tactic that Dillian Whyte might want to try in a fight like this, because let's be real, this is a very difficult fight for Dillian Whyte. Another tactic he might want to try is to pretend that he's hurt. Tyson Fury these days seems to like knockouts and going for the finish. So Dillian Whyte could pretend that he's hurt by a shot, pretend that he's more tired than he actually is to make Tyson Fury come in like a red flag to a bull. And as Fury comes in, bang, Dillian Whyte has got a shot set up for him, ready and waiting, either the left hook or timing that big overhand right in a similar way to Nevin Pikage or Steve Cunningham. Remember, Oliver McCall, when he fought Lennox Lewis, trained his entire camp to land the exact right hand that he hit Lewis with in the fight. Manny Stewart, who trained Oliver McCall for that fight, revealed that afterwards. He said, "We trained the whole camp to land that exact punch. And if you concentrate, if you hone in on landing a particular punch against your opponent, you practice that enough times, chances are you're probably going to land it in the fight." And finally, Dillian Whyte needs to avoid this particularly bad habit that he has of bringing his feet together. And I think it's a spillover from his kickboxing career. But when you do that, you're standing straight up. You're unable to generate any serious power because you don't have your balance when your feet are that close together. And you're also unable to make the necessary defensive maneuvers. If Dillian Whyte makes that mistake in this fight and he's constantly bringing his feet together, Tyson Fury will definitely take advantage of it. Tyson Fury will look at Dillian Whyte's feet and he'll know that from that position, Dillian Whyte can't counter effectively. So Dillian needs to maintain the correct distance between his feet, stay on the balls of his feet so that he's always on balance to either attack or defend. So that concludes part 1 of this Tyson Fury Dillian Whyte Keys to Victory video. Stay tuned for part 2 where we discuss what Tyson Fury needs to do.